On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is TalkTV.
Tonight on Piers Morgan Uncensored, Harry and Meghan were booted out of Frogmore Cottage just 24 hours after Harry published his kiss and tell book, Spare. Has the King finally got to grips with the rogue royals? And will he now ban them from the coronation too and strip them of their titles? The lockdown files heap more pressure on disgraced Matt Hancock as he angrily denies claims made by Isabel Oakeshott on this show last night. Tonight, she's back with more revelations, including what Hancock and the Care Minister Helen Whately said about me when I left Good Morning Britain and when I had a COVID test. Plus, a spate of protests erupt in London over drag queen performances to children as 15 US states consider laws to quash the Queens. Are drag artists really harmful to kids? We'll debate.
Live from London, this is Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Well, good evening from London. Welcome to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Harry and Meghan, currently the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, famously gushed about their love of chickens in one of the more saccharine moments of their Oprah Winfrey sobfest. Well, the chickens are now coming home to roost for these two. The royal family kept a stoic silence as the poison darts rained down from their Californian pedestal. But King Charles is quietly and devastatingly taking charge now. We now know that he booted the couple out of their palatial Frogmore Cottage just 24 hours after Harry's book Spare, or Spare Me as I call it, was published. We also now know that Harry and Meghan's popularity is cratered on both sides of the Atlantic, with polls showing even Prince Andrew is now more popular than they are in America, as well as now being offered the keys to their house. And we also now know that in America, where they've strained every sinew to become much-loved celebrities, they're actually viewed like this.
So let me start with you, sir. You've lived a life with the royal family, you've had everything handed to you, but you say your life has been hard, and now you've written all about it in your new book, Wah. Yes, that's right, friend. You see, my wife and I are totally like, you should write a book because your family like stupid, and then so are like journalists.
There's now a clear divide in the royal family, the workers and the shirkers, the heavy lifters and the grifters. The Prince and Princess of Wales saluted Welsh Guards yesterday at St David's Day Parade. Camilla, the Queen Consort, recovering from a recent bout of COVID, was promoting children's literature. King Charles is preparing to make state visits to Germany and France in his first royal tour as monarch. Meghan Markle, meanwhile, made a state visit to a coffee shop which sells superfood lattes inspired by holistic ingredients from around the world. And Prince Harry had another outing on US late-night television, the leftovers of a previous interview taped on his self-pity tour.
Harry, what is the best sandwich?
I would say a cheese and ham toastie with Dijon mustard on top.
And a toasty means grilled? Is that what that means?
Yeah.
OK, there you go.
Unbelievable. That guy's sixth in line to the throne. On Saturday, he's at it again, flogging tickets to a digital seminar on family trauma, his trauma from his $13 million California mansion. You have to pay $33, by the way, to tune in online to see him banging on about his trauma again and what a victim he is and how it's all so beastly and unfair that he's making hundreds of millions fleecing his royal titles without doing any royal duty for it. But that's his level now, isn't it, for Harry? A gossiping gutter snipe, selling out his family to the highest bidders, a wannabe reality star. But that star is fading fast. Harry and Meghan think they can carry on having their royal cake and eating it, using those royal titles, like I say, while abusing the institution that afforded them those titles. And as usual, I'm afraid, they're wrong. And King Charles is right to draw the curtain on this ludicrous soap opera. On May the 6th, the King has his coronation. It will be one of the most important moments in modern British history. And the very last thing we need or want are the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, current titles, rocking up with their camera crews to distract attention and get more material for their next act of money-grabbing betrayal. Next week, 2,000 invitations will be sent out. In my view, it's time for Charles to be firm and make sure they're not on that list. Well, joining me now is the Sun royal editor, Matt Wilkinson, political journalist, Ava Santina, plus author and columnist, Maureen Callum. Welcome to all of you. Let me start with you, Matt. Great scoop. I mean, this was a proper eye-popping scoop, particularly now that we know that the order to evict Harry and Meghan from Frogmore Cottage came from King Charles within 24 hours of the launch of Spare back on January the 10th.
Yeah, no, it's astonishing. I mean, Charles, I see it as he's acted very quickly, very decisively. Particularly, it was so close till after Spare, and he's seen the family's traumas, the family splits, everything that's happened with Meghan and Harry and Andrew that kind of poisoned the last 3 or 4 years of the Queen's reign, sadly. And you could say that Charles has finally, by kicking them out of Frogmore, he's kind of finally delivered Megxit.
Now, I don't suppose you'll lose much sleep over Meghan Markle disappearing out of Frogmore Cottage. He probably will lose some sleep over this action in relation to his son, because he's his son.
It's very sad that it's got to this stage, isn't it, really? I mean, we're always told, and he has shown as well, that we're always told that he dearly loves his son and the door is always open to his son. When Harry came over recently, they came over with Meghan and they came over and they met at Clarence House. And I think it's an intense disappointment and sadness for Charles that it has actually got to this stage, yes.
Let's bring in Maureen Callan from across the pond over in East Hampton. Maureen, thank you for joining us. I was staggered last week to see a poll that said that Meghan and Harry, since the release of this book and the Netflix documentary, are now less popular in the US than Prince Andrew. I mean, that was jaw-dropping.
Oh, Piers, it's remarkable, really. There's no love lost here for Prince Andrew, believe me. I think the real sort of final wallop to their reputation here, one that leaves no doubt where the bulk of the American public stands on these two, was the South Park episode. So for the South Park episode to air and it went viral and people could not stop talking about it, to then be followed up with this incredibly, it's a sad decision, but it feels very necessary for King Charles to remove them, to send a clear message that what you are doing and what you are continuing to do, as you pointed out, with this Saturday's upcoming Winjathon online for $33.99, with pre-vetted questions, no live comments, I do believe that's King Charles saying, there are more things we can take away from you if you do not stop harming this family.
Right, I completely agree. Well, look, Ava, you're in the unenviable position of trying to defend these two, because I think pretty much everyone else we tried to get to do it didn't want to know. I mean, they've lost even their keenest supporters. Are you still standing in Team Sussex?
Look, I have never been Team Sussex. I've always been Team anti-monarchy and anti-royal, and I don't think that any of them actually have a place at the top of the hierarchy in the UK anymore. I think it's outrageous that they even had entitlement still to this cottage. I mean, when they renovated it, they charged £3 million to the taxpayer, which I know they eventually paid back. But the idea that £3 million was taken away, potentially from paying nurses, from paying teachers, and re-wallpapering that cottage.
Well, the
makes me
truth
quite
about
sick.
the royal family is, though, that the costs of maintaining the royal family are offset by the money they bring in.
On.
Oh, they are.
Oh, come on. It's just so ridiculous.
They're offset by the money that comes in, particularly from tourism.
Listen, people come in because they know. People like to see Buckingham Palace. They like to see the relics of our monarchy past.
Is your physical distress tonight because you were at the Arsenal-Everton game last night?
I am crying. Yeah, I am.
Hammered. Have you been crying ever since?
I have been. Yeah, that was the 100th time that Arsenal have beat Everton.
Yeah.
That last night. That was really quite upsetting.
Booting last night. So I just want to make sure you're okay.
Thank you.
Seem a little delicate tonight. But the point about the monarchy, though, is you're wrong about that, because you may not like the idea of it. That's fine, but they don't actually cost the country any money. They're a net positive.
They cost the country a fortune, and Prince Charles has a lot of his own money. Prince Charles has a lot of his own money, actually enough to sustain himself. He does not need to be taking money off the taxpayers to live his life.
You can keep telling me they cost a lot of money. They don't.
OK, could you tell me how they don't?
Tourism is...
But they would come without them. They would come to see the castles.
But it's also the incredible good work that they do, not for their own benefit, but for the benefit of the country. They don't have to go out and do all this wonderful work for charities. They don't have to go out and raise lots of profile for charities.
You would do it?
They're not doing it for their own personal gain. They're doing it because they're members of the royal family.
You can't even go to a football match without getting upset.
I would happily read a book today, like Camilla did, and then get to live in a palace off the back of that.
It's a lot harder job than that.
Camilla's been to prisons and read books too.
I'll do that.
Also, every tiny spit and cough of your private life would be spattered across the papers. Would you be comfortable with that?
Fine. It's so boring.
Well, anyway. Given I failed to even rally a tiny slither of support from you for the Sussexes, that's all, obviously the woke crowd have all abandoned them. I want to bring in now Ernest Jones. Now, Ernest Jones, I'm sorry, Ernest Owens. I do beg your pardon. Ernest Owens, thank you very much indeed for joining me. And now, I don't know much about you, other than you wrote a piece last week for Rolling Stone magazine saying cancel culture is good for democracy. So I'm going to come to that ludicrous premise in a minute. But I also remember you tweeting when I left Good Morning Britain, a series of tweets calling me a racist, including enjoying how folks keep getting Piers Morgan together for his racist tirades against Meghan Markle on Good Morning Britain. I was just curious, could you remember a single racist thing that I said about her or have ever said about her?
Well, thank you for having me on, Piers. I was surprised when I found out I would be on your show.
We're an uncensored show, Ernest. We take all types on here.
Well, all types. Well, there you go. But I think really a lot of it just seemed to be biased. I think that you was really just harsh on the Duchess of Sussex. And I think there was a little bit of bias in the way that you had really gone after her.
Yeah, but Ernest, to be clear, I didn't ask you about that. I just said, what were the racist tirades? What racist thing have I ever said about Meghan Markle? I'm curious. You tweeted quite a few times that I was a racist. I'm just curious, what was the racism?
I said your remarks was racist. I didn't say verbatim
what were the remarks that
you
were
were
racist?
I think that it's biased. I think that you had a sense of bias of how you were speaking about her and how you was really being insensitive to her mental health and how you were denying a lot of her concerns.
Being biased or sceptical of some of her claims is not the same as being racist. What was the thing I said that was racist?
I never... Hold on. Do you want the person of colour to speak, or do you want to just talk over me?
Nothing to do with your skin colour, Ernest. Sorry, nothing to do with your skin colour. I don't care if you're black or white or anything else. I just want you to try and tell me, given you tweeted to your many followers repeatedly...
Are you going to let me talk,
by the way,
repeatedly,
you did this repeatedly. You have called me a racist repeatedly for racist things I've said about Meghan Markle.
I said you made racist remarks. I did not call you a racist.
To stand by what you tweeted. What was it I said about Meghan Markle?
I am. Would you let me talk?
Ever that's been racist?
Are you going to let me talk, or are you just going to overtalk me?
Just answer the question. Stop asking different questions.
That's microaggression. You're asking a black person to explain how what you did could be perceived as racist, and rather than let me finish talking, you're over-talking me and being highly defensive.
Am I being racist
so I feel
again,
like a hit dog is hollering right now.
Am I being racist again?
You're being dismissive. Can I actually talk? Or
Maybe because you're not answering the question,
what's the point of you on the show? Okay, so can I answer the question?
Yes, you can. Please do.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So your targeting of Meghan Markle's mental health, gaslighting her specifically, calling to question the legitimacy of her claims about the royal family being racist, you dismissing those claims, you consistently having a sense of badgering her and targeting her, it's felt like on my end that there was some racial bias there. Now, you may feel like it's not. Maybe it's sexism. Maybe it's misogynoir. Maybe it's a combination of both her gender and her race. But it was perceived by thousands of people. 57,000 people had called Good Morning Britain about some of your behavior.
No, you see, you've got to be very careful, Ernest.
Mischaracterizing the situation on Fox.
Ernest.
You act like it's just Meghan Markle, but it wasn't just Meghan Markle. It was other people who had concerns.
Ernest, you do have to be careful when you spew more lies, unfortunately, because 57,000 people...
Weren't you not spewing lies?
I'm about to explain
Fox News?
what you just said was wrong, a lie. 57,000...
Or you're going to give your interpretation.
If you're going to let me answer the question, 57,000...
Go ahead, Piers.
Ernest, 57,000 people complained to Ofcom, the TV regulator, and guess what?
Correct.
5 months later, every one of the complaints was thrown out, and Ofcom found in my favour to have my right to free speech and freedom of expression. But I come back to my initial point about you. You repeatedly tweeted to many people that I'm a racist, and I'm simply asking you to name one single comment... Ernest, one single comment I've ever made...
between racist comments?
So, did I say a racist tirade? What was it?
I felt like your attacking of Meghan Markle was racially biased.
Oh, you felt like
and
it?
I believe
you felt like it was your feeling?
I felt that way.
It was your feeling that I'm a racist, was it?
I felt like what you did was racially insensitive. I never said verbatim on Twitter that you were a racist. I said you made racist
actually,
remarks.
you just said enjoying how folks keep getting Piers Morgan together for his racist tirades. We're actually looking at your tweet now, Ernest. And there were plenty more. In fact, while I'm talking to you, we'll dig the others out. Just go and dig them out, folks. Here's my point, Ernest. The reason that people think that I may have had a racist connotation to my criticism of Meghan Markle. It's because people like you, high-profile black people in America, kept saying that without any evidence. And now I've got you on my show. I'm finally able to ask you, why did you tell lies about me?
You're blaming the black guy?
I'm not blaming the black guy. I'm blaming you as a high-profile black man for claiming wrongly and defensively that I was racist in my motivation towards my criticism of Meghan Markle, which, to be clear, my criticism of her and Prince Harry is I think they both tell lies. They both recently said they didn't mean to call the royal family racist when we heard them say it with their own mouths on national television. So my point to you, Ernest, is you can say these things. You can say these things on Twitter, but when you're actually held to account for them...
You said about Meghan Markle, and look at the
have
impact
any
that had on her
evidence
mental
to
health.
support
You
what
have
you're
a bigger
saying.
platform than me, and you've attacked Meghan Markle, and it's impacted her mental health. And I feel like someone like me, as a black person, defending her as an innocent black woman in that situation, I felt like I was standing up for her. You need to be accountable for your impact and your power.
Oh, I stand by everything I said.
You have a big influence, and you're trying to play a victim.
I stand by...
what you did
I'm
to
not a
Meghan
victim.
Markle, and it was disrespectful.
No, Ernest, I'm not a victim and I'm not a racist.
Are you a victim, Piers?
Ernest, I'm not a victim and I'm not a racist. I'm somebody who listened to that.
I never called you racist. I said you made
listened to the
racist
Oprah Winfrey... Just let me finish speaking. I listened to the Oprah Winfrey show, I watched it, and I identified immediately a number of lies. And I said that on air the next morning. Other guests disagreed with me, and you were delighted about the way they came after me, and that's fine. But then you said I was racist, repeatedly. That my criticism was racially motivated.
You're being intellectually dishonest. You did not just say she was a liar. You questioned other aspects of her mental health.
No, I said I didn't believe
other aspects of it as offensive. Repeat what you said.
I said I didn't...
Repeat what you said.
I said I didn't believe her.
Why?
Because there is no evidence to support the claims that she made. She said she went to a senior member...
her expressing what happened to her, how she felt, was no evidence?
Ernest, I'm about to tell you what I said. She said she went to a senior member of Buckingham Palace staff and said she was feeling suicidal, and that member of staff said she couldn't get help. That story doesn't reappear in Harry's 415-page book and has never been substantiated by anybody else, nor has it been repeated by Meghan Markle.
You didn't know that when you said that,
I'm afraid...
but you did not know that when you said that.
Sorry, I didn't believe it. It didn't sound true. And by the way,
but why?
I'm allowed...
But why you didn't believe it?
Ernest...
Ernest, you're allowed to. So you're allowed to believe that she's lying, and I can believe that what you said was racially biased.
I'm allowed to disbelieve her.
And I'm allowed to believe that what you said was racially biased.
And I'm also allowed to disbelieve you when you call me a racist, because it's wrong. And you shouldn't do it.
I said that you made racist remarks. I did not call you a racist, Piers. You're trying to make yourself a martyr in a situation that you started. You didn't have to go disrespectful below the belt with Meghan. You chose to do that. And now you're mad because other people disagree with you.
For what I thought was a disgusting attack on the British royal family.
You made ad hominem attacks against her character. You assassinated her character before the British press. And you know how the tabloids have been towards her. You understood what you were doing.
I've been just as scathing, if not more so, against Prince Harry, who I actually think is more to blame.
Didn't you... Now, I want to know if this is true. Riddle me this. Wasn't there a point in time where at least you tried to pursue a relationship with her? You all had history before all of this happened?
No, absolute nonsense.
Okay, that was
another
nonsense?
lie. It's another lie. I met her once in my life.
Okay.
Okay, what do you mean, okay? We found more tweets while we've been talking to you of you calling me a British media racist darling. What does that mean, Ernest? What does that mean?
It means that you have recently chosen, lately in your career, for whatever reason, you went the road of basically baiting into a lot of the biased coverage of Meghan Markle.
Absolutely.
And a lot of it has been
this is the
racist
problem,
attacks. A lot of it
Ernest.
has been targeted towards her in a biased way. And come on, can you admit that the coverage around Meghan Markle has been racially biased? Can you admit that?
Absolutely not.
Not talking about your work,
no, I think
but in general.
I think it's another load of absolute hogwash. Nonsense.
So you're dismissing the role of race in all of this. You don't think none of this has a role in any of the coverage she's been getting?
The British media has never been racist about Meghan Markle.
Okay, that's just a lie. We're going to agree to disagree.
It's not a lie. It's a fact.
Disagree.
It's a fact.
No, it's not.
What is a lie?
No, it's not.
What is a lie, Ernest, is you telling people repeatedly, I'm a racist, and then you can't produce any evidence other than it's your feeling.
I said you made a racist tirade. and you're offended. But here's the thing:
not
you're
offended.
blaming me for the criticism.
I'm not offended.
You said
Ernest.
you're
I'm
blaming
just
me as a
calling out-
high influential black
I'm
person, a
calling
black
out your
American.
lies, and by the
for
way,
why
it has
people are
nothing
questioning
again-
you. You're blaming me for your criticism.
It has nothing to do with your skin colour, Ernest. I don't care.
But you
I
literally
care
said
when
you
you
said I was
lie.
a black influential person. You named my race. You said you're a black influential person, and that's why
Yes.
people thought that way.
I think when
so why did you bring my
high-profile-
race into it?
I think when high-profile black people like you go public on Twitter.
Okay,
and-
high-profile
Sorry,
black people
go-
like me.
like
Go
you,
ahead.
go public on Twitter and call me a racist. People
Like you went public on Meghan Markle. Continue.
People believe it, and you know what? It's a
And people
sickening
believe what you said about
lie.
Meghan Markle, or no?
It's a lie. Anyway, we've got to leave it there, and it's been lovely catching up with you. Let me go to Maureen again. Maureen, one of the problems I have with this whole debate, I guess, is the way that Meghan Markle framed all this through the prism of racism and was supported by people like Ernest Owens and others who bought into this whole narrative, the royal family are a bunch of callous racists. Really striking to me that none of the race claims reappeared in Harry's book, nor did any of the mental health claims, none of it. It was like it never happened. Now he's been giving interviews saying, we never meant to call the royals racist. And then you have this guy, who I don't know from Adam, by the way, other than he thinks cancel culture is good for democracy, which is obviously insane. He thinks it's fine to just go on social media and call me directly, repeatedly a racist. And when I ask him for any evidence of racism in anything I've ever said, he said it's just a feeling he gets.
Yeah, I mean, it's really very difficult, especially if you were, as I was also, critical of Meghan Markle pretty early on. I had very much the same reaction to the Oprah interview that you did, where multiple things that she was saying, that Harry was saying, Harry was not saying, they weren't adding up. They didn't make any logical sense. The idea that Prince Harry, who along with Kate and William founded Heads Together, right, a mental health advocacy platform, would be told that his wife, who is suicidal, can't get help. It made no sense whatsoever.
Not only was that nonsense, but also their little claims like the Archbishop of Canterbury, she said, married them secretly 3 days before the televised wedding. That would have been a crime, and the Archbishop would have been taken to prison. So immediately I knew this was all nonsense. She made a claim that their son Archie wasn't going to be a prince because of his skin colour. Again, immediately we knew that was complete rubbish. She didn't understand the succession rules. So all of it was, to me, garbage. I mean, I said I wouldn't believe her if she read a weather report. But it's ironic that the guy that calls me a racist but can't support it just wrote a piece for Rolling Stone last week. I'm sure you saw this, saying that cancel culture is good for democracy. Actually, it's the opposite. It's incredibly damaging to democracy because it's really about feelings, not facts. He just feels I'm a racist. He can't actually point to anything which is racist. He just feels it. And I think that's one of the massive problems we have in society.
I couldn't agree with you more, and you suffered a very real-world consequence. You lost your job under the cloud of racism. You know, and so it's doubly gobsmacking to have Harry on his worldwide privacy tour, right, promoting this book, when he sits with Tom Bradby and says, well, we never said they were racist.
Yeah,
we never said the royal family was racist. And you're going, are you gaslighting? Are you just gaslighting everybody? Haven't we all been laboring under this illusion that you and your wife have been perpetuating while, by the way, your grandfather's dying?
Absolutely unbelievable. Well, Maureen, thank you, as always, for joining me. I didn't know Ernest was still with us, but thanks again, Ernest. I loved catching up. Final observation to you two about this. I do think that racism charge, Matt, was incredibly damaging to the brand of the royal family and the monarchy. And for Harry just to simply pretend that wasn't what they meant.
It honestly, it sent shockwaves through the royal family when they said that on Oprah. They were silent for about 48 hours. I couldn't raise anybody because you knew they were just looking introspectively, thinking, what on earth, where has this actually come from? And they came out with that infamous statement, recollections may vary, which now lives on. And when he came out, I spoke to people after. He spoke to, I think it was Anderson Cooper, when he did the interview and said, we didn't mean it to be racism. Everybody in the palace took that original comment he made as Oprah as an allegation of racism.
I mean, Ava, what do you think? I mean, you lend yourself to the woke, so I presume you still identify as woke.
No, come on, that's silly. Don't open a question.
But one of my
that.
big problems with the woke brigade is this thing about they put feelings before facts. They think it's enough to feel these things, to have a lived experience, even if it doesn't actually happen. It's what you think happened. You know, this guy thought I was a racist, so he just tweeted it.
Well, look, I mean, I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to start taking part in any of that. But I think around the palace, I think Meghan made a claim. I don't understand why Harry retracted on that or reneged on that. I don't understand why he did. I truly believe her. I still believe her now. I did actually think that a lot of the press coverage was racist.
It wasn't.
I do think it was, actually.
It wasn't.
I think the way that the press went after her was not methodical. It was quite shocking to see. It was uncouth.
There was no racism.
You've got to think about what was written in tabloids. You've got to think about what was, we're talking about her exotic blood, this, and, it was gross.
There was one line in a
written.
Rachel Johnson piece, who is the least racist person you'll ever meet.
No, she is not racist, I know
and she
that,
apologised, so you accept she's not a racist, so it wasn't racially intended at all. There was one clumsy headline about straight out of Compton, because
But you've got to think about the swarm that was going around Meghan Markle at the time.
They were the only two things that anyone could find in the entirety of tabloid coverage. And right up to the wedding, it was unbelievably positive. Unbelievably positive.
It wasn't positive.
Oh, my God,
we're living
up
in
to the
two
wedding.
different Britons.
No, you're living in cloud
two
cuckoo
different
land. You don't
Britons.
think it was positive. It was euphoric. Anyway, we'll take a break. Lovely to see you. You're staying, I think, aren't you?
Yeah.
If you can get
If
through
I
the
can
night.
keep through it, yeah.
Is it a cold
No, it's the Arsenal game. It really has upset me.
Great scoop.
Thank you.
Proper old-fashioned eye popper. Congratulations to you. Matt Wilkinson from The Sun. Will still to come Matt Hancock, another Matt, not so impressive, is fuming for what he calls a massive betrayal by TalkTV's Isabel Oakeshott. He's shameless, she's unrepentant, she's back with more revelations, including some about me. It's after the break.
Dearly beloved, let us pray. Yeah, careful. Who in Crane 2 exactly?
Rishi is like some kind of submarine prime minister. He isn't making the case. You're making the case here now.
I think you did kill these women.
Yes.
They need justice.
We're done.
You did kill them, didn't you?
Tell you what, we're all racist, we're all sexist, we're all homophobe. Bandalila.
History is littered with a long line of lovable but angry men.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to give you a damn good thrashing. Finally, my stupidity pays off. I don't believe it.
But one man rises above them all.
What just happened?
Passionate and always straight to the point. World-class broadcaster Vanessa Feltz is on TalkTV every night of the week. From politics to pop culture, there's no subject she shies away from. And remember,
if you're thinking about it, we're talking about it.
Join Vanessa Feltz on TalkTV every day from 4 p.m.
It's all kicking off just in the breaks here. Well, welcome back. It's day 2 of the sensational lockdown leaks, which have piled pressure on disgraced former Health Secretary Matt Hancock. Today's files reveal then Education Secretary Gavin Williamson, the man who was fired 3 times. Imagine how bad you've got to be to achieve that accolade. He blasted teaching unions for looking for excuses not to work during the pandemic. Hancock called them absolute arses, which is pretty ironic coming from him. Well, tonight I can reveal what an absolute arse Hancock and his own top team were about me. Quite extraordinary, this. First, in May 2020, I got COVID symptoms and I took a COVID test. And so I tweeted this to say, look, until I get the results back and I get the all clear, I can't do Good Morning Britain. Hancock immediately tweeted his team with an opportunity. He wrote to them saying, tempting as it is, I probably shouldn't comment on this, but a few colleagues pointing out kindly that he can only have a test because of the ramp-up of testing in the past week would be good, so beneficial for him if he wished me well. An advisor wrote, you should tweet him best wishes, totally straight, wish him all the best and hope he's okay. Be really classy and then get others to point out how classy you're being. And that's exactly what Matt Hancock did. If you test positive, I sincerely hope it's mild, he tweeted me publicly. And other people praised him for being so classy. And that wasn't his intention at all. And a series of fawning Hancock followers duly congratulated his commendable maturity, exactly as he and his team planned. Classy stuff. Well, in March of the following year, this actually gets better. By which time Matt Hancock had presided over one of the worst COVID responses of any of the wealthiest countries in the world, I'd left my job at Good Morning Britain. We just discussed that. You already know the story. We've just been debating it. What I didn't know until today is that the Health Secretary, Mr Hancock, and the then Social Care Minister, Helen Whately, during a deadly pandemic, they saw an opportunity here as well. Helen Whately messaged in the WhatsApp group to Matt Hancock, how about we celebrate the departure of Piers at or after our team meeting tomorrow, PM? Just a thought. Hancock replied with one word, perfect. Would have been, wouldn't it, if they'd had a big party to celebrate me losing my job after actually holding people like those two to such vigorous account for the previous year. Only one problem. If they did have that party, we don't know. Lockdown restrictions at the time would have meant that that kind of party to celebrate me losing my job would have been strictly prohibited, illegal. And the people that made that law would have been them. Well, joining me now is our very own Isabel Oakeshott, who got that sensational scoop. TalkTV presenter Richard Tice, who probably has known about the scoop longer than most of us. And political journalist Ava Santina is still with us, struggling with, I think, is a burgeoning cold, which, if you give it to me, means you won't be back on the show for at least 6 calendar months.
Neither will you, by looks of how unwell she is.
Obviously not COVID. Fascinating little insight just involving me in these things, not significant by any means compared to all the other significant stuff, but interesting into their mindset about how they just were spinning everything and how jubilant they were to get someone who was calling them out on all of their nonsense repeatedly, getting what they saw as his due comeuppance.
I mean, I did a search for your name today, Piers, and I have to say that there were so many mentions of you that I had to give up trying to pull them all out. Look, they were frankly obsessed by you. They were continually wondering what to say to you to keep you in the place that they wanted you to be. They were worrying about the extent to which you were challenging them. You and I differed over what you should have been challenging them on. Where we did agree is that they should be held to account.
Right.
And they didn't like that. And they were absolutely overjoyed when you left your job.
I also found, Richard, that the one about COVID, I mean, at that time, COVID was still, this is very early on in the first wave. You know, one of my Good Morning Britain colleagues, Kate Garraway, her husband, was critically ill and remains so from COVID. So it was no laughing matter for us if somebody got COVID in their 50s at the time with no vaccine. So I was pretty concerned. Actually, it turned out I didn't have it then. I did get it the following year, but I didn't have it when I feared I might, and when it was really scary, you know. Certainly I wasn't laughing about it. This was a pretty serious moment. And yet the way they reacted even to that, pretty callous.
But that's what we know, is that actually they were laughing about lots of things at a time when they had successfully terrified the nation. And in those first few weeks, no one knew what was really going on, but they seemed remarkably relaxed about it. That was sort of May 2020. And the idea that they could be wasting time in the nicest possible way, Piers, thinking about you, they should have been focusing on the science. What's the latest data? What are the right decisions to make? What are we getting right? What are we getting wrong? What do we need to change? They shouldn't be focusing about any individual at all. And I just find that whole thing throughout this process extraordinary.
Well, I mean, what we'll see in tomorrow's Telegraph is the kind of gloating and the gleefulness with which they reacted when people were arrested or got into trouble with the authorities for supposed breaches of the lockdown restrictions. They were very keen, for example, to see Nigel Farage punished, and even went to the extent of trying to get the Home Office involved in making sure that he was
tough question for you on
punished.
this, because you obviously come at this from a very anti-lockdown perspective, and you're perfectly entitled to, and lots of people felt the same way. My oldest son was part of that bandwagon and remains so today, but then he's a young person, doesn't see the need for young people to have taken it that seriously. My question for you, though, if you were the Health Secretary, or the Prime Minister, say you were the Prime Minister, right? You two are running the country, which, God forbid, could one day happen, who knows? If you're running the country and we get hit by a novel virus again, and it was the first time, we hadn't been hit by COVID already, right? So it's completely new. And you see it destroying health systems in Italy, right on our doorstep. One of the best health systems in the world. People just dying in their thousands every day. And there's no vaccine. There may not be a vaccine. There are no therapeutic drugs. People are dropping like flies. We don't really know yet that it's targeting just old people or vulnerable people. We don't really know anything. Other than a lockdown to buy time, what else would you do to stop mass death?
This actually isn't a tough question for me, because I'm not actually a critic of the initial lockdown.
Right.
I think that was absolutely the right thing to do.
So it's the ones that came later?
Yeah, I think subsequent lockdowns were not justifiable as we found out more about how this disease worked, what the mortality risks were amongst different demographics. But absolutely, I would have taken that decision in those early days until we worked out what this was we were contending with. Imagine if it had been Ebola-like and the fatality rate was higher.
I met one of the people involved with the AstraZeneca vaccine up in Oxford, and he said to me, "It's like, you don't want to worry about, COVID so much anymore, but if the plague comes back, which had a 30 to 50% death rate, including children, imagine that." Yep. Right, so and this is what keeps those guys awake at night. On COVID, very interesting series of things have been bubbling out about all this, and we need a proper global look at this, obviously. But certainly things like the efficacy of masks are now being seriously questioned in some of the reports I've seen. Certainly, there was a massive U-turn on whether vaccines could prevent transmission, and I was all for punishing people who wouldn't take it if it meant they could still transmit it, and if they had the jab, they couldn't, right to the point I was told, well, actually, that was a mistake. So I changed my mind. And we're now being told that it almost certainly came from the lab and not from the wet market. Again, people that said this kind of thing at the time, and I'm not going to absolve myself from responsibility for being censorious. I was, but I was basing my censoriousness on what I believe the experts knew. Turned out they didn't really know.
And that was the whole point, Piers. They didn't know, but they wanted to shut down debate, whether it was the Wuhan lab, where did it come from, the masks. I mean, I had something taken off YouTube with Mike Graham from TalkTV.
Well, Mike Graham shouldn't be on YouTube.
Because we talked about...
shouldn't be on YouTube.
Because we talked about masks. And there was never any evidence. Indeed, let's remember, right at the beginning, actually, our own health experts, the government advisors, were saying...
They said they're pointless.
They're pointless. Yeah. And then they changed their mind.
There are still different schools of thought, but we should certainly be examining this, right? Eva, what's your take on it? I mean, we live in a strange world where, this show's called Uncensored. And like I say, I'm not going to take myself out of the blame game for this, for being overly... I was censorious, actually, because I was acting on what I believed to be the fact. But it turned out that actually, like a lot of stuff in a fast-moving health crisis, the facts change.
I think what the leak has shown is how self-serving and, well, untruthful that entire cabinet was throughout the entire Boris Johnson premiership. I mean, Matt Hancock just he's come across as one of the most two-faced fake politicians I think that we've ever experienced.
Well, the whole thing about his the 100,000 tests a day, I was on him about that.
Yeah, that was very self-serving,
I was on him about that every day on Good Morning Britain because I smelt a rat when he finally got there. Now it turns out he got told, actually, if we just send them out, it doesn't matter if they get taken, that'll count as a test. The whole thing was a racket.
Yeah, but also like he was a little child, like he needed to hit a goal.
Yes.
I mean, that's not public health.
Yeah.
And that goal actually disadvantaged the testing of people going into care homes, whether it was from hospitals or staff or patients from the community. That was the impact of that, and that's incredibly serious. And that was all because of his target. We understand ambitious targets, we all have them, but his was an absolute obsession. And he fixed it at the end with 26,000 rocking out of an Amazon warehouse to make the numbers when he knew loads of them wouldn't be used.
Isabel, Matt Hancock's accused you of a massive betrayal, which did make me laugh out loud when I heard that this morning. But, I mean, what's been your reaction to his reaction?
What I would say is the number of messages I have got pouring in from ordinary people saying thank you for doing this, because we need to know this stuff and we were never going to get it from a public inquiry that has no deadline. The betrayal is not me betraying a politician and his precious reputation. The betrayal is his. He betrayed the whole country with a flawed response to the lockdown, and I make no apology whatsoever for putting it in the public domain.
No, but I do worry about what's going to happen to anyone who's lost someone from COVID. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, how trivialising this whole thing makes it. Matt's movements throughout all of this trivialises. Why do people die? Why do people lose their loved ones? Because of this self-serving idiots.
I completely agree. It all looks like politics and spin and making himself look good. I have to say that the book, which you did with him, was a hagiography of, look at me, I'm great, I cracked it, everyone loves me. And now we look at the WhatsApps and we think...
It actually had quite a lot of revelations in it. If you, you know, if you read it, there was a lot. To be fair on Matt, he did lean towards revelation where he could, but it was never going to be comprehensive.
Not really. It was basically about what a hero he'd been.
I
and it turns out he wasn't a hero.
But you remember that expression, we're following the science.
Yes.
And it turned out to be an absolute...
Well, also it turns out...
never following
It also turns out that I think in a free country, the science should be challenged from all sides, right?
Because there's no such thing as the science.
And I will never again take it all as sacrosanct and be a censorious in any circumstance, because we learned a hard lesson. We've got to take a break. When we come back, protests at drag performances for children erupt in London. Are drag queens a threat to kids? We'll debate that.
Dearly beloved, let us pray. Yeah, careful. Who are you praying to exactly?
Rishi is like some kind of submarine prime minister. He isn't making the case. You're making the case here now.
I think you did kill these women.
Yes.
They need justice.
We're done.
You did kill them, didn't you?
Tell you what, we're all racist, we're all sexist, we're all homophobe. Bandalila.
History is littered with a long line of lovable but angry men.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore! I'm gonna give you a damn good thrashing! Finally, my stupidity pays off! I don't believe it!
But one man rises above them all.
What just happened?
Passionate and always straight to the point. World-class broadcaster Vanessa Feltz is on TalkTV every night of the week. From politics to pop culture, There's no subject she shies away from. And remember,
If you're thinking about it, we're talking about it.
join Vanessa Feltz on Talk TV every day from 4 p.m. This is Talk TV.
Well, welcome back. Outrage has erupted across America as drag queens leave nightclubs to take over libraries and schools for drag queen story hours for kids. The events have become so controversial, but a third of US states are debating laws that would make it harder to perform in drag at all. The latest frontier in the culture wars has now reached Britain's shores, with protests erupting and drag events for kids at the Tate Museum and a South London pub. Well, joining me to discuss all this is gay rights activist Peter Tatchell, drag artist Vanity Von Glow, plus YouTuber and political commentator Lauren Chen. Let me start with you, Lauren. So it's been a big thing in America, this. Why?
Well, I think this is such a huge topic right now because parents are frankly fed up of the idea that just because you're going to be called a bigot unless you agree, that you're supposed to be all right with grown men wearing prosthetic breasts performing for your children. And there's a lot of people who will say, well, they're just reading stories. We know for a fact that that's just not the case. There have been leaked videos from these drag performances where there are sex acts being simulated, where there's nudity. And there's even one going on right now, a viral video that shows someone performing in BDSM gear. None of this is appropriate for children. This isn't a gay rights issue. This is simply what is proper for children. If this were females performing these acts, it would still be unacceptable. And frankly, I'm not going to be scared into silence and saying this is not all right, simply because I might offend some people. If you want to do this in your own time with an adult audience, that's one thing, but this is absolutely not family friendly.
Okay, so Vanity Von Glow, I've been to a drag show in West Hollywood. You can imagine what that one was like. Very full on, very outrageous, very funny. Had a great night. Wouldn't want my kids anywhere near it when they were young.
Yeah, that's understandable. I work in Soho in the basement bars, and I wouldn't necessarily want kids at my show either. It would restrict what I'm able to say. And
so should they be going into schools or performing at events with kids in that kind of environment?
Well, we need to be careful to avoid the type of hyperbole that I think is taking place in America. You know, Cardi B is not the same singer as Barbra Streisand, and the work that she does on stage is not the same as the performances of Barbra Streisand. In the exact same way, drag is a broad church. There's a lot of different performance styles, and it's not always this hypersexualized, stripper-esque performance that's a big part of the drag of burlesque. But there's also a lot of drag that I find it a little dull. I wouldn't want to do it, but that's quite Disney princess, quite anodyne, actually. And that's what's happening at the Drag Queen Story Hours, as I see it in the UK.
Peter, is the problem that, as with all these things, there are a few examples where drag queens have simply gone too far. They get caught on camera. That becomes the narrative. And suddenly we move to quite a puritanical response. I mean, for example, when you go to Panto at Christmas, there's normally someone in drag and everyone's laughing and the place is full of kids. So I don't think necessarily it is always harmful to be in a children environment. But it does depend what they're doing. And some of these clips I've seen have been, I think, crossing a line.
Well, certainly here in Britain, the drag story time is very much about encouraging young people to read. It's about using drag as a way to engage people.
But do we have to do that?
Well, it makes it more fun for kids to have this character dressed up, all glamorous and spicy, to tell them stories rather than some boring man in a suit.
Does it prompt too many questions, though, of a sexualised nature? I mean, there is a whole debate in America, particularly Florida, Governor DeSantis there and others believing you just shouldn't have anything sexualised going on in young school classrooms.
But I can assure you the drag story times in Britain have no sex whatsoever. It's just simply a man in drag telling stories like anybody else would, wholesome, innocent stories, family stories, and often the parents come along as well. And the reports I've heard from parents is they are delighted that these drag queens have managed to get their kids interested in reading.
Piers, you would have taken your kids to see Panto when they were younger, I'm sure. And Lord knows I grew up loving Mrs. Doubtfire, and I've turned out just fine, Piers. I think that the problem is we get this cultural hangover from the States a lot of the time. Of course, there are the odd pictures of people doing the backward splits and all that, where I'm not sure that that's the type of performance that we're describing when we're making a defensive drag queen story.
Well, let me ask Lauren on that point. I mean, Mrs. Doubtfire was a hugely popular movie. Did that offend you? Would you watch that as a child? If so, what's the real difference?
Well, I think there's a very important distinction to be made between cross-dressing and specifically drag. And I have to say, I think your guests are aware of this difference. The history of drag is very rooted in sexualized performances. The person who kind of pioneered Drag Queen Story Hour specifically talks about using drag in order to subvert the nuclear family, heteronormativity, and in order to implant, I guess, notions of queerness in children's brains. So I'm sorry, but no, I simply don't believe that this is just about getting kids to read. There are so many different ways that we could have initiatives to encourage literacy among children, none of which involved adult men wearing prosthetic breasts, which is exactly what drag is.
Well, ultimately, there may be a slight cultural difference between Britain and America on this, because the panto culture is so prevalent here, and it isn't in America. So it might be...
I just want to also add, I'm sorry,
quickly,
but we live in a society where everything is offensive, including a white person wearing dreadlocks. Why is it okay? Why is it celebrated for grown men to be essentially wearing woman face and performing all these caricatures of female sensibilities?
So just to clarify, Lauren, you're offended by it, are you?
Well, I think it's hypocritical for these people who are often on the left.
No, I'm just asking whether you're offended by it.
Offensiveness.
I know, but if you're so anti-people being offended, are you offended?
I wouldn't. I am offended of this happening in front of children. Yes, that does offend me very much.
Listen, I've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you both very much indeed. Thanks. We appreciate it. Coming next, Boris Johnson breaks his silence and everybody wishes he hadn't.
Dearly beloved, let us pray. Yeah, careful. Who in Ukraine to exactly?
Rishi is like some kind of submarine prime minister. He isn't making the case. You're making the case here now.
I think you did kill these women.
No, sir.
They need justice.
We're done.
You did kill them, didn't you?
Tell you what, we're all racist, we're all sexist, we're all homophobe. Bandalila.
History is littered with a long line of lovable but angry men.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore! I'm gonna give you a damn good thrashing! Finally, my stupidity pays off! I don't believe it!
But one man rises above them all.
What just happened?
Passionate and always straight to the point. World-class broadcaster Vanessa Feltz is on TalkTV every night of the week. From politics to pop culture, there's no subject she shies away from. And remember,
if you're thinking about it, we're talking about it.
Join Vanessa Feltz on TalkTV every day from 4 p.m.
Well, coming up on The Talk, further fallout from those lockdown files as new leaked WhatsApp messages show cabinet conflict over lockdowns and school closures during the pandemic. And MI5 apologises after an inquiry says it missed a significant opportunity to stop the Manchester Arena bombing. And should prisoners be used to pick crops? All of that and more at 9.
The best read we've had. Well, welcome back, Isabel Richard. Quick wrap-up here. Boris Johnson broke his silence today to try and stick the knife into Rishi Sunak and his plan for getting Brexit actually done. I just don't want Boris Johnson to break his silence. I'm going to just shut up now and go away.
I think half the country wants that. But look, the reality is he sees an opportunity. He's been carefully assessing what he should do, when he should speak. It's becoming clear that more and more people in Northern Ireland, unionists, probably the DUP, Lord Frost yesterday, Boris coming out today, are saying actually Rishi has completely missold this deal with the EU. If you read the EU's documents, it's almost like a completely different deal to what Rishi did.
But in the end, Isabel, the bottom line of this, most people, whatever side they were on, they just want this over with. And if it means a little bit more compromise than they're prepared to stomach, then so be it. I just think Boris trying to do what he's doing on manoeuvres, trying to stiff Rishi, how does that help anybody?
Well, it was ever thus with Boris. He's been doing this for the last 15 years, hasn't he? And I agree with you. Look, most people they didn't really understand it if they don't live in Northern Ireland or the Republic, and they just want it to go away. And I'm not surprised. Look, it was a communication triumph for Rishi Sunak. The small print, as ever, doesn't match up, but most people are not going to be too upset by that.
Exactly. Well, thank you, both of you. You must have had an interesting few months, you two, knowing about this bomb about to go off, so I appreciate you both sparing me time in your busy schedules tonight. That's it from me. What are you up to? Keep it uncensored. Good night.
Dearly beloved, let us pray. Yeah, careful. Who in Crane 2 exactly?
Rishi is like some kind of submarine prime minister. He isn't making the case. You're making the case here now.
I think you did kill these women. No, they need justice.
We're done.
You did kill them, didn't you?
Tell you what, we're all racist, we're all sexist, we're all homophobe. Bandalila.
History is littered with a long line of lovable but angry men.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore! I'm gonna give you a damn good thrashing! Finally, my stupidity pays off! I don't believe it!
But one man rises above them all.
What